What up, my fellow teens? I hope y'all are having a great day so far on this Wednesday, November 12th. We're here today to talk about immigration. It's been a big, large topic in the news as of late, and we're also here to discuss basic economic theory. So, starting first, immigration, we'll talk over some things that are happening right now. For example, Trump cracking down a little bit on a lot of these ICE raids, many people calling them authoritarian. Many people calling them immoral, that we're taking people from their homes and taking them off to another country. Off its face, Democrats believe that if somebody has come here and they're benefiting the country, that there's no reason to remove them. The Republicans would say, well, they have broken the law. So at the very least, there is justification to remove them, whether or not it's the right thing to do. Yeah, perhaps that's still up for debate. Democrats, it seems like, won't even admit that. They won't seem to admit that it's justified. They won't even seem to admit that they have broken a law because Biden did quite a good job of changing how these laws work in terms of immigration. For example, Biden made it so that if you cross the country illegally, you can actually retroactively receive temporary status by claiming asylum in the US, even though you didn't claim asylum in the way that procedural you're supposed to do at a specific point in the border and provide paperwork. Now you can actually just go online, type in a few buttons, and be undocumented, claim asylum, and have no problems whatsoever. It's I I don't want to make a claim of whether or not it's the right or wrong thing to do, but I did bring up a few numbers just to give some thought and give some, we'll say, context to the discussion. So under Obama, from 2013 to 2016, that's in his secondary term, annual net immigration actually only ranged from around 650,000 to about, 1.5 million per year. Of course, under Trump, that came down a little bit. Annual numbers fell to net immigration listing around 400, 600,000 a year. Then, of course, Biden comes back in and it goes right back up. Numbers significantly increased to actually 2.6 million in 2022 and 3.3 in 2023. So, as you can see, Biden not quite tripling, but nearly tripling the numbers that Obama saw in terms of net immigration and what he was okay with. It does seem fair to say that the Democrat arguments on immigration seem to have become far more extreme in near the last 10 years or so. Going from 650,000 to 2.6 million, I mean, that's an increase of five times. But if you look at the higher percentage, it's max of about three times as high. Not that bad, I suppose. Of course, on these numbers, you can't just say, well, haha, 3 million, that's the number. That's not okay, right? That means nothing. And, perhaps since the country is growing, there's more people in the world. Of course, that number should technically go up. Of course, in 10 years, tripling, or it's not quite how the numbers work specifically in America, for sure, in terms of birth rates and all that. But this is incoming from other countries, so it would be slightly different. Now, is that wrong? I would say probably not. It probably isn't wrong that a country can decide who can and can't come into the country. And if you decide, I'm going to break those rules and come in anyway because it benefits me. And even if in 10 years I end up benefiting a few people along the way, I think it would be fair if the government came and said, hey, buddy, you've been doing good for the last 10 years, but you did break the law when you came in here, so we're going to have to take you out. And then I am sure would say, but I've done so much. What can I do? But if there is no path, at least there is not one provided to me, I think that rather fair. And given my own perspective, I actually came to the country not a citizen. I became a citizen actually less than 2 years ago. So this actually impacts me quite a bit. Now, of course, I was green card holder. I was here legally, so it is slightly different, but there was always an opportunity that perhaps trends could differ. Perhaps it could become more difficult for me to end up getting a green card. Maybe tensions could flare with Canada, though, of course, likelihood is low. With the way that Trump and Canada are speaking with one another, maybe the likelihood is higher than once was thought. So, personally, I love America. I think it's the best country in the world. That's why my parents moved here. That's why I am staying here. And so I do think it's fair that if someone decides, hey, this is the best country in the world, you have reasonable laws, but I'm going to break them because it's going to help me and my family. I think that's fair. But if a government comes in and says, buddy, we caught you. I mean, all you can do is throw your hands in the air and say, that's unfortunate, but at least I tried to make my family's lives better. I mean, I'm sure Trump and the police officers, ICE agents, I'm sure they don't hate these illegal immigrants. Maybe the ones that shoot back at them. I saw on the news the other day that someone was shooting at ICE agents, and it looks like they were arrested. Thank God. There is an issue in the country right now that things are getting a bit inflamed. People are hating ICE agents as if they're bad people when they're doing a job, and their job is quite reasonable. So I think that everyone needs to calm down a bit. Understand that different person has a different perspective. Like when Biden came in and he changed these policies to triple immigration numbers and make you retroactively be able to claim asylum, which has never been done in the history of the US. It's not as if Republicans were fighting police officers or fighting the border agents to say you need to be doing more. Of course, it's not as if it's them and us versus whatever. But I definitely think people need to calm down a bit because what they're doing, at least to me, it does appear reasonable for a country to do. As long as you believe that a country is sovereign and that they can protect their own borders. I personally believe that a country is very much like a house, in that a country runs and owns that country. And it will only allow certain people into that country. Just like I will only allow certain people into my home. I won't allow terrorists and murderers. But of course, these immigrants aren't terrorists and murderers, at least not all of them. But does that mean that they can just walk in, right? If somebody breaks into my home without me asking, well, things will probably get physical, right? It'll be much worse than me just escorting them out of the house, like ICE appears to be doing with people in the States right now. So they appear to be taking a very reasonable and actually kind approach where I think a normal person, if someone came into their place, I think it would usually get to a much more serious angle. Now, of course, the immigrants are saying, hey, well, this is my home now. I do understand that. Shameless plug. Excuse me. Excuse me. I do understand that. I get that these people now consider America to be their home. Maybe, maybe they're renting a place. Maybe even they put down a down payment. You never really know what's going on in the country. The problem is if I lie on my application and I get 3 jobs down the line, I get promoted and they find out I lied. If that's on a legal or a medical application, I'm going to jail. They don't just say, hey, buddy, we caught you. It's time for you to go. You go to jail because you've been lying to people and taking advantage of them. I don't think that we should put immigrants in jail. I think we should just take them back to their country, which is what Trump and the Republicans appear to want to do. Now, there are a few people who are being shipped out to other places than they maybe should. I think there was a guy from El Salvador who El Salvador wouldn't take him for a time, right? And that is a complicated issue. If a home country won't accept someone who snuck into our country illegally, what should we do? I think it would be reasonable if we put them in jail, but I don't want to do that. It costs us money and it feels unnecessary. So I think, personally, I think that the president or the country should likely communicate with El Salvador, the foreign nation. And in my opinion, they should win that argument. If this is your citizen who snuck into our country illegally, we're just going to give him back to you and you can do whatever you want with him. Now, of course, if you start murdering your own citizens, like perhaps China is thinking or doing at this time, personally, I think that we should actually take some actions against China more than just having a conversation. Perhaps it should be sanctions, complete non-working with them. Like, we shame companies that did businesses with Hitler. Well, we used to. Now, Volkswagen's still the biggest car company in the world. In my opinion, I think that maybe we should, even if our lives are worse, not support people who are doing horrible things in their country. So if El Salvador took these citizens and they murdered them, well, we should stop sending them there for sure. But we should also do something about it. Now, I don't think that we should be the world's police. I'm not arguing that we send troops on the ground. But even if our lives have to be decreased, less improved, I think that that is what we should do. That's the most moral thing to do. Okay, and being the most moral is not always the right thing to do. Well, it is the right thing to do, but it's not always what I'm going to do. I'm not the most moral person, right? I'm going to get as much money as I can without deceiving people. So maybe that just comes out of selfishness. Thanks for your time talking. Immigration, I thought that was an interesting issue. Just wanted to get some thoughts out there. Now, economics, that's something I'm actually really passionate about. And I'm going to keep it short today because I don't want to just rant forever about economic theory. But economics are really simple. You have supply, you have demand, and on a graph, I can show you how every single government intervention decreases net productivity and value towards a society. Now you might say, well, Matt, what about Medicaid? What about food stamps? Well, sorry, that doesn't really mean anything because food stamps, for example, you provide food stamps into the business or into the situation. Suddenly there's going to be an issue because demand has been artificially inflated. So one thing's going to happen, prices are going to increase. Another things that's going to happen is there going to be fewer people who can actually do that job because it's easier to get the money, right? So it's going to negatively impact suppliers. It's going to negatively impact the people who want the goods. Now, it might not negatively impact those few people who get the food stamps, but in terms of net productivity, it is going to be less value towards a society than a free market. You might say that's immoral. You might say, hey, even if we're going to worsen lives for everybody else, like you were saying earlier, maybe the most moral thing to do is to provide food stamps. Now, I agree, but I also believe in free will. So I'm believing that this country, America, for instance, has the right to say, hey, I'm going to decrease my own in life so that I can do something that I believe in. Now, food stamps, on the other hand, requires everybody in the country to do something. It doesn't give you the free will to make that decision. It doesn't allow you to make a choice of prioritizing yourself and prioritizing your morals. Perhaps we shouldn't give people as much choice in their lives. I disagree. I don't think that the government is built to be the structure of morality for a country. I don't believe that it's there to redistribute, to decide who deserves what. If you do, then food stamps are probably a good thing. If you don't, then food stamps and any government intervention is only going to reduce value to the society overall on that. And you're going to do that by force. Now, if everybody supports food stamps, if everybody just says, I'll give up more of my money, I completely agree with that. I have no issue whatsoever. The only problem is the fact that we're forcing everyone to do it. Now we're taking away their freedom to make their own choices with their own money and to prioritize themselves. I believe everybody should be able to prioritize their own life. If you want to make more money and you can doing X, Y, and Z, I want you to be able to do it. I don't want the government to be impeding your ability to do so. And that's where I'm kind of filling in with those things like food stamps. If there's going to be a single mother who has a kid and she has to decide, am I going to send my kid to private school or am I going to pay this extra tax on food stamps and am I going to send my kid to a worse school? Now, you might call that an extreme, but if you add up all of the government interventions in terms of food stamps and Medicaid and Medicare and all that they do, it does add up. And it can make the difference between a parent being able to send their kid to the best school possible and sending their kid to what's reasonable and makes things easier. We should allow people to make that decision for themselves. That to me is more moral. And you're also providing more value to the entire population at the same time. Now, if that person's individual decision to put their kid into private school means that this other single mother isn't able to provide her kid with food, then maybe those kids need to go somewhere else. Maybe that money towards food stamps should be going towards adoptions and supporting foster homes in the US because there's a lot of money in all of those government intervention programs. I don't know what things should and shouldn't be. I do know that we're providing less value to society by having these government interventions. And you might ask, hold on, what do you even mean by value to society? You're lying to me. You're making up stuff. You can't say that's just more valuable. I had the exact same question. Unfortunately, there's a really good answer. Now, how would you value the human life, the human experience, and value whether or not it's good or bad? It's a hard issue. Now, in school, I learned that there's many, many things that we can't actually consider that are, in my opinion, great. Now, first of all, it can be, well, what's the average size of your home, right? Like, if you have a bigger home, your life is going to be better. If you're stuck in a small shack, it's going to be slightly worse. The affordability of food. So, how easily are you able to obtain food for your family? Right? Reducing the amount of these single mothers that actually exist. What's the average height? What's the average age or obesity, right? Because you could know how healthy a society is if they have enough nutrients for them to succeed. You can check education, right? If they're able to, on average, elevate to a higher education, then it's quite likely that their life experience or value has been improved. What else? In terms of how long you can live, right? There are so many things that can be measured to decide on whether or not life and value has been improved or decreased. Now, hey, this is something I'm passionate about. If there is anything that comes to your minds, put them in the comments. How do you think we can measure and value human life? Because we want to get there. My own uncle, he came up with a great one. He got kind of a heated, instead of framing it in, well, I feel like a lot of these models don't consider the impact to the environment. He got a little angrier than saying in that way, but that's a great question. And there's actually a lot of economists that weigh that into the picture. Now, in my own opinion, I'm not sure you can. Because can we decrease the lives of the people in the now for the people in the future that don't even exist yet? I believe we can, but only if everybody decides to. If I decide to, I can give it up. If my neighbor decides to, they can give it up, but I can't force them to. That's my one opinion. So thank you for your time. If you have any ideas on what can value human life, put them in the comments. I'm really interested to read everything you can think of. Uh, I know I'm just talking, but I really appreciate your time if anybody listens. Have a great rest of your day.